the Africa we want. Under the Agenda 2063, there's an aspiration of Africa being a global player and partner. Maybe in the next few minutes, we'll find out how Africa can be able to achieve that. And with me on the set is Zimbabwean Minister of Tourism and Hospitality Industry, Honorable Dr. Walter Mzembi. And also, he is the candidate. Okay, he is a candidate for the UNWTO Secretary General position that falls vacant in 2017. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you, dear sister.
The aspiration of the Agenda 2063, where Africa wants to be a global player, a global partner, how possible can that be?
It starts with the visit. It starts with travel. It starts with the tourist. And if you trace the history of the colonization of the globe, it started with actually the visit. It is the visit that then translated into business and investment and trade decisions. And we are now back to the second renaissance of Africa. And purely it will be driven by travel. There are only two revolutions of our contemporary times. It's travel and IT, with both of them assisting each other. And to the extent that in 1950 there were only 25 million travelers around the globe. Today, 1.2 billion travelers. I'm yet to see any sector in the world that can rival that kind of exponential potential and growth. So the renaissance of Africa, the Africa we want, will begin with that journey, that exploratory journey, be it for leisure, be it for business, be it for religious purposes. When people reach destinations, they move to the next level of assessing trade opportunities, of assessing investment, but it starts with that journey, that visit, that exploratory sojourn that we as Africans must make in the first instance by visiting each other. And secondly, admitting visitors.
Thank you so much for raising something like that. You realize that most of the Africans, those who are actually even middle-income earners, do not know their next city or even their neighboring country. How do you think that can be achieved when we are still struggling amongst our own African countries?
We must inaugurate, within the context of Agenda 2063, a Visit Africa campaign. And our leadership, our heads of states, ourselves as leaders, ministers, must provide that leadership in sending the message of charity begins at home, knowing Africa first before we begin to appreciate the world. So a Visit Africa campaign, what it would simply do in the first instance is to localize cash flow. Africa is a net negative travel balance. We have more people traveling out of Africa to other destinations, spending our hard-earned income on European and American destinations before we actually localize and circulate the cash flow within the continent. We currently receiving 53 million international arrivals. When I say Africa is a net negative travel balance, it means there are more than 53 million people that are going out there to plant and deposit our wealth outside the continent. We should circulate that income first.
Let me stop you there. Before we talk about the unequal growth and performance of both Africa and Europe and all that, I know that's going to be falling under your manifesto, but you've expressed intent to vie for the presidency, for the Secretary General position of the UNWTO position, and it falls vacant in 2017. Why do you think the world should trust you for that key global position?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a natural marketer. I have a disposition for marketing. And I did not just start it in this peace-loving and happiness-loving sector that we call tourism. I started in engineering marketing, me being an engineer myself. I'm a fellow of the Zimbabwean Institution of Engineers. So selling engineering products is the most difficult of all propositions. And drifting into tourism, the nice stuff, obviously has been a natural forte. But that notwithstanding, I come from a background of a country called Zimbabwe, which everybody had written off at some stage. And this is why I'm also very happy to be in Rwanda, because you share the same history of adversity. I've been able to demonstrate how to turn adversity into opportunity in the same manner that Rwanda has done. 10 years ago I was here, it wasn't like this. Yep. It was all gloom, but they've been able to use that negative vibe, to use that market awareness and consciousness of who Rwanda is, who Zimbabwe is, to move to the next level of securing opportunities for your destination.
That's
what I've done
okay.
with Zimbabwe from 2009, raising revenue profiles from just a mere 200 million, arising out of the decimation of the brand through sanctions that had been imposed on Zimbabwe, to what it is now, a $1 billion economy. And I'm signposting going forward a $5 billion tourism economy by year 2020 for Zimbabwe.
That's remarkable progress, Doctor.
Sure.
But you're talking about just one country. We're now talking about the globe, the entire
Yeah, absolutely.
globe.
But
putting all the countries together.
A journey of a mile begins with a small step.
Okay.
If you are not able to convince the world that you have been able to turn that adversity into an opportunity in your own backyard, you can't be a valuable proposition for the continent. But at continental level, I'm now in my second term serving Africa as its chairperson for the Commission for Africa. And I've been able to bring to the awareness of the African Union the fact that they'd actually evidently missed travel and tourism in Agenda 2063. And one wonders how it was going to be translated without capturing the revolution of our contemporary times, which is travel. Travel today generates 1.5 trillion in direct income, which we treat as exports in the tourism sector. It generates 288 million jobs. It is 6% of the world's exports, 30% of services in terms of exports in the globe, 1.2 billion arrivals. And yet Africa's market share is just a mere 3% of these statistics. And Africa now requires an advocate. It requires apostasy. It requires a champion who can begin to bring this potential to the fore of our leadership to say, hey, something is wrong. How can we reverse this trend? We reverse it first and foremost by dealing with the brand Africa construction, because our brand is largely misunderstood. Yes. We are a destination of 54 countries, a conglomerate of 54 countries that are sometimes and so oftenly treated as a contiguous destination. Yeah. So if there's a problem in one corner of Africa, it causes collateral damage to the rest of Africa. So we need to disaggregate that brand and develop it along regional brands, then building into the seamless African brand that we want to see going forward, which is epitomized by Agenda 2063.
Doctor, you're here at AU and you're here to get an endorsement from the AU Commission. Why do you think this is important? And do you think by any chance, since the tourism aspect was missed out in 2063, you can be able to... I've basically rescued the situation after getting a mandate from African tourism ministers to rescue that situation. And I can assure you now that it's all busy within the Commission Secretariat in the authoring of a continental tourism policy. In Brand Africa Construction, we were in Ghana recently under the patronage of President Madramani of Ghana, developing this African brand and how best we can go forward with it. We are now talking about Cape to Cairo Schengen visas going forward, opening up of Africa, which is symbolized by the adoption of an African passport here during this summit. We are now talking about the translation of Agenda 2063 into creating the attractiveness of Africa. The Yamoussoukro Declaration, which prescribes open skies, open border policies, granting 50-degree freedom rights to airline operators. And I'm happy that here in Rwanda, where I am during this visit, I've been able to pay a courtesy call on Rwanda Air. And we agreed that we must connect Kigali to Lusaka, to Harare. We must connect Harare to Kigali, to Guangzhou, Kigali, to Harare, back to the United Kingdom. And this is the connectivity that is missing in Africa. We don't want to go to France in order to go to Cameroon first in the next stage. We must be connected directly and internally and efficiently distribute African tourism. Doctor, do you expect to tie the support from AU as far as your vie at the UNWTO is concerned?
Well, there's been a lot of consensus in Africa out of a realization that divided we fall, united we stand. Yeah. So back at SADC, as soon as I expressed ambition for this position, and by virtue of my also being the longest serving African tourism minister, there was a natural deferment and a natural support for my candidature, which resulted in SADC adopting me as its candidate. And we've transferred that goodwill to the AU, and I'm happy that the day before yesterday, I appeared before the Committee for Candidates for International Systems, and I was the only candidate from Africa, meaning that there's been respect from my colleagues to give me a head start and a chance to create unanimity out of my candidature, which will then compete with any emerging candidate from other parts of the globe. But I can assure you that we will be a serious contender for this position.
Since the establishment of UNWTO back in 1974, we've never had any candidate from Africa. No candidate has been fielded from Africa. No candidate has filled that position. Is it because no African was capable?
Because of the level, because of the level of consciousness of what tourism and travel could do for the continent, to the extent that we've been able to raise during my tenure at the Commission this iniquity of Africa actually just partaking only 3% of global tourism performance, going at 1.5 trillion today. It has raised that consciousness amongst my colleagues that we must sponsor at least one candidate to begin to reverse this trend. Because when we are there, we're in the cockpit of global tourism, we're able to place the agenda in terms of what really is afflicting our destination. And there are issues mainly related to perception, to connectivity, to destination accessibility, and we need to deal with those. And to the extent that there will be an African there, I think Africa itself will begin to understand statistically what we can do with this sector.
Now we can draw on a few highlights maybe of your manifesto. You've repeatedly talked about tourism, and from my understanding it seems to be a huge and economic lifeline of Africa. But according to latest figures, and to be precise, Global Tourism Barometer, Africa registered a decline in arrivals performance at negative 3%. What approaches do you intend to apply to ensure that you deal with this unequal growth and performance?
Well, we were doing well as Africa until the Ebola crisis. Now, when that pandemic broke out in West Africa, Europe, which was actually at the doorstep of that scourge, did not suffer this contagion effect. Sub-Saharan Africa, where I'm coming from, where we are all located, suffered more from contagion effect of Ebola, meaning that we have to address issues relating to brand Africa, to disaggregate the brand, starting with the development of attractive national brands. And in nation branding, there are 6 pillars. Unfortunately, we tend to think that branding just relates to tourism, but there's governance, which we must package properly. There's the issue of investment and migration, which relates to ease to do business and business attractiveness and competitiveness, and also openness of the destination under that pillar. There is the area of arts, culture, and heritage, how we can position Africa with its cultural diversity as an attractive proposition to international source markets. The aspect of expos, which is being dealt by this conference and previous summits, how we can extract value out of our raw materials, industrialize to the extent where we don't push out our raw materials and primary products without any form of branding. Because when you read a product which says made in England, it means England is present here in our consuming mindsets. So Africa has been pushing virtually 90% of its primary products and raw materials without any form of patenting or brand recognition. And therefore exports are a major pillar of creating brand awareness going forward. But it is the people of Africa who now represent the greatest opportunity for the rebranding of Africa. By year 2050, Africa's population would have doubled, but not doubling with an aged population, doubling with the youth dividend, a young population. So it will be the most attractive proposition globally when you compare us to India and China in terms of market options, in terms of a young ICT-driven and compliant population. And we must position ourselves as such. How many people know, for example, that Zimbabwe is the most literate country in Africa?
Not many.
How can we leverage with that going forward to present the next stage beyond literacy is skills development and take advantage of the 85 million jobs that are going to be exported from China as China seeks to create jobs closer to the raw material sources like Africa? How do we translate that education in Africa, that ICT skills development base in Rwanda, to the next level that aligns itself to technological transfer in order to unlock the full potential of Africa.
Dr. Mzembi, very good you have been at the helm of the Commission in Africa. Okay, what are some of the achievements you can leverage on that can give you a better positioning or a better play, okay, when it comes to that position globally? Well,
we want to connect Africa to the world. But my vision going forward of a UNWTO is one that seeks to establish universal membership. In other words, I don't believe that we should pursue exclusionary policies, as is currently the case where we have countries that have opted out of the institution. The United States is not inside the UNWTO. So is the UK, so is Canada, so is Australia. But today we are now beset with problems that require inclusivity, and it is tourism and security. I can't imagine a day going forward where we can discuss tourism and security without the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada and Australia on the table. So equally, within the African continent itself, we must drive absolute inclusivity. We don't want any countries stepping outside international organizations that are related to travel and tourism, because then we miss the opportunity. And I will be driving the issue of inclusivity. But second to that, aligning the tourism agenda to the SDGs, because tourism is a developmental sector, and this is why we've positioned it for next year through the United Nations as the International Year of Sustainable Tourism for Development. We want to develop, but we want to develop in a sustainable manner. So SDG number 8, 12, and 14 speak directly to tourism. But we want to make sure that as we develop the global tourism, there's an alignment to conversation that is taking place elsewhere within the UN system to our own agenda in global tourism, which is growth with equity. We don't want a global tourism that leaves others behind, that pushes other countries ahead of the rest. And we want equitability.
Finally, I'm given a notification that my time is up. But finally, how would you rate your possibility to assume the position?
Well, with Africa in the bag, as it seems now, with the endorsement, I'm moving to the next level now of charming the world. And we have a proposition for each region. I have a proposition for Latin America, the issues that are besetting them. We want to see an America's region that is not driven with the politics that relate to erection of walls. We want to pull down the walls so that there's seamless product development of the Americas. The natural disasters are also a feature in the Americas. Earthquakes, recently we had earthquakes in that region. We want to include in the definition of insecurity natural disasters. This same definition is also akin to South Pacific and Asia, where in the most recent past we had tsunamis in Japan. They killed more and destroyed far a lot more than terror. And we want, therefore, natural disasters to be included in the definition of insecurities. In Africa, for example, we want the issues related to El Nino-induced droughts, epidemics, to speak to the issue of insecurity as we go forward next year to the 2017 UN Year on Tourism, so that we don't leave other candidates for redress and mitigation. Climate change, for example, what it is doing to our region. We have fast disappearing water bodies and lakes, which in the past were a natural affinity for product development around tourism. But they are disappearing because we're simply not getting the generosity of the Almighty in terms of watering our globe. And therefore, I have a very holistic approach to travel and tourism, which will speak to each region going forward. Europe, for example, they are grappling with insecurities there. They are grappling with the refugee crisis. We want to be able to prescribe solutions that do not necessarily make them panic and close borders, but secure seamless travel, secure and seamless travel without necessarily undermining the legacy of the open skies, open borders and policies that resulted in the Schengen. And the Schengen is driving 600 billion of European tourism because they were leading in that openness agenda. But they could easily reverse it if they panic. So it's a mitigated approach which seeks to answer each region.
Thank you very much for your time, Doctor.
Thank you.
And I wish you well. Please charm away. Charm everyone that comes your way. And I hope you can get to the helm of the UNWTO.
Thank you so much. And I am very happy to be here in Rwanda.
Okay.
It is a fine example of destination openness. I was sharing that with President Kagame only just yesterday when he paid a courtesy call on President Mugabe.
Yes.
And I applauded President Kagame and Rwanda for, one, their openness of the destination, which has become an international benchmark. But the is to do business, where investment and trade is able to open and incorporate businesses in under 24 hours. These are good achievements for this country.
Thank you very much, and I'm very sure that congratulations have gone to the policymakers and all those, the key players concerned, especially in making sure that all that is in place. Well, that is just a component. His candidature or his vie for that position is just a component of the key element of the Agenda 2063, where Africa wants to be an influential global player and partner. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm Ime Moleka Tete. Be well and be blessed.